All right, good morning. My name is Gary Matsuoka, and we're here at Lagoon Hills Nursery. The calendar says February 22nd, but when the tomatoes come in, it's spring. So spring begins in a month, but the weather is so good right now, it's hard to resist planting them. So just so you know, tomatoes work best, or they flower and set fruit best at temperatures between 55 and about 85 degrees. And that is our weather between March and June, March through June. Now, last year we had cool weather throughout most of summer, which really helped. But most years it is March through June. So if you plant them now and you get your plant up to a good size for production, they'll be ready by the time the weather is at its perfect. Because right now we're still in the high 40s some nights, which is a little bit cool, but they're going to be making flowers and fruit right away, because we've had already some nights in the mid 50s. So we handed out the handouts, and they have some terminology on them. So first thing I want to do is tell you what some of that means. So there's two styles of growth on tomatoes, and it's determinate and indeterminate. The vast majorities of tomatoes we sell are indeterminate. So the difference between that is that determinate tomatoes act like true bushes. So as they grow, they branch out fairly evenly. And all these branches kind of mature and bloom and fruit at the same time. So you get a plant that ripens all its fruit at once. Peppers are this way. So if you grow chili peppers, they grow, they branch once, and then all the branches tend to bloom at the same time and fruit at the same time. Determinates are really popular in the north, where the season is short. Like if you're in Minnesota, you got 4 months to grow tomatoes. So these are generally smaller plants, and they produce sooner. We don't usually grow that many determinate tomatoes here, because most people want tomatoes all year. The indeterminates, what they do is they're more of a vine, and they mature as they grow. So here at the bottom, let's just put it this way, they'll continually make foliage on the top, and along the way they start making flowers. And near the base of the plant, they're already mature there, so they've already got tomatoes forming down here. So the whole plant continually grows, continues to bloom as it grows, and then there's a section of area where the fruit's ripe, and that travels up the stem too. Now these can make side branches, and most people let them make side branches. So most of the tomatoes we have are indeterminate. They can actually continue to produce fruit for several years. If our winter's not too cold, they'll just make it through the winter and keep going the next year too. So that's the main difference. Determinate. Now determinates can actually grow a crop, ripen the crop, take the crop off, and they can continue to grow another crop, but they do the same thing. All the branches tend to bloom at once. Peppers do that. So the tomatoes can do that too, but indeterminate is the vast majority. I would say 95% of the tomatoes we get in are indeterminate. Okay, then there's the question of heirloom and hybrid. There's not a big difference. It's mainly going to be genetics. So heirloom tomatoes in theory, are the tomatoes that somebody saved from a long time ago, 40, 50, even 100 years ago. They saved their favorite tomato, grew it from seed, saved those seeds, grew it from seed, and they've got, so generally on heirloom tomato plants, you've got, say if it's a 2-chromosome plant, which I believe all tomatoes have 2 chromosomes, just like 2 sets of chromosomes like humans do, that both sets of chromosomes are about the same, so that every generation of new plants looks the same. It's not, I mean, you know, they follow the regular genetic rules, but just say it's inbred. The heirloom tomatoes have been inbred so long that all their offspring look like the parents. Hybrids are the result when you cross 2 different heirlooms. So you take, say, a famous heirloom like black Krim, which is a black tomato, and then you take an orange tomato, you cross them. The offspring is a hybrid that has a lot of different genetics to it. And because of that, a lot of the hybrids tend to be, not all of them, I mean, some are real dogs, but a lot of the hybrids tend to be sturdier plants because they've got various, more different genes than the heirlooms do. Heirlooms tend to be a little more unique, but the hybrids tend to be a little bit sturdier plants because of their genetics. Hybrids are more expensive. So when you buy tomato seeds, most tomato seeds you buy are heirlooms, because all you do is you take the fruit off of a plant and you take the seeds out, and generally the seeds will give you something that's very close to the original. Whereas in a hybrid, when you have 2 different heirloom parents and you take the seeds from a hybrid, sometimes the resulting seeds can be all over the place. So, I mean, my kids are hybrids. So my wife is German Scot, which genetically is basically German. And then I'm Asian, and our kids are definitely hybrids. So heirlooms would be like people from the Appalachian Mountains. So same genetics for a long time. So the thing about hybrid seeds is they're very expensive, because you've got to take 2 different heirloom plants, and you've got to take the pollen out of one and put it in the flower of the other. With the other flower, you got to take the male anthers out so that they can't pollinate itself. So it's a work they do in greenhouses. And they have to do it, it's not easy to do hybrid seeds. So like these seeds, the heirloom seeds are running, this is just ordinary heirloom seeds. They're running, looks like about 10 cents a piece. $2.99 for 25 seeds, $2.69 for 25 seeds, roughly 10 cents a seed. If you buy hybrid seeds, they'll run you about double or triple that amount per seed. So it is unusual when they put hybrid seeds in a 6-pack. These are hybrid seeds. This is a hybrid here. It's not common. A lot of, especially the newer hybrids, seeds are so expensive that they usually just put them in single pots and charge you a lot more, because those seeds cost the nursery a lot of money. Okay. I would imagine if you're buying, thousands of seeds, they're not quite as expensive. And just so you know, too, tomato seeds respond to heat. So if you plant these in an unheated house, let's say it's 70 degrees, about a quarter of the seeds will sprout right away. If you have a heat mat, you run it up to close to 100 degrees so the soil is hot, they all sprout. So tomato seeds really need it hot to grow. So if you try starting them this time, you'll be aware of that. If you put them in a covered container, something with a clear lid on top, and set it out in the sun, it'll get hot in there, and that'll help. Or on a windowsill, so the sun can heat it up. If you leave this uncovered, the evaporation of the dirt will keep it on the cool side, and you can't get the temperature up high enough. So, but a heat mat, or if you, like we used to have a customer say, "Oh, I just put on the top of my VCR box in the day, keep it warm." Something that gives off heat, get those seeds sprouted quicker. Okay, so the nice thing about tomatoes is they're really strong plants. So a tomato plant can tolerate the worst soil that they make. So tomato plants, one of the few things, if you have a compost pile in your yard, you'll know tomatoes can grow in that. No other plant can tolerate a compost pile. It's full of bacteria and fungus trying to eat the plants up, and a tomato can grow in it. So tomatoes are really strong. So unfortunately, most of the potting soils in the U.S., when the people who create them, use tomato plants as their test plant because they'll grow on anything. So most potting soils are compost. Lots, good nutritional value, unsuitable for most plants, but tomatoes will grow on them. So you can, our potting soils, our acid mix in our top pot are far superior for most plants to grow into. Tomatoes do really well on our soils, but again, you can use the worst soil out there and they'll probably still grow in it. Yes.
So 10 years ago could grow tomatoes and produce 10 years ago I could grow tomatoes and produce really good fruit. In the past 5 years, it seems like they grow, and when it comes to fruiting time, I'm just not getting any fruit. And this happened about 4 or 5 years ago. So something happened in Southern California that is keeping our tomatoes from producing?
Well, usually it's proper crop rotation that's the big part. So if you grow the tomatoes in the same spot over and over, after about third year, they just don't do anything anymore. You got to get them into.
I've been moving them around, and I'm still just not. I get a little bit of fruit, not. But
depends how early you start your tomatoes too. We have some. So currently we've got some bugs out there that can mess up tomatoes in the summertime. I don't know. We've had good crops at our house. I mean, last year was a really good year for us. I don't know.
I've watered I've had the same problem the last 4 or 5 years. A lot of growth, not much fruit. And last summer, I watered them far more than I ever have watered tomatoes, and we couldn't eat or give away the tomatoes fast enough.
And you got more water.
Yeah, it was not something I expected.
Yeah, generally if the soil is proper and the weather is not extreme, we haven't had extreme weather for 3 years now, where, like 3 years ago was 100 degrees in April, which was a little warm for that time of year. We might get it again this year, we'll see, but we've had good crops, especially last year. We had real good crop at our house. So you can pull out the plants and bring them in if you have a problem with them again. And, we'll look at the plant, the roots and all that, and see if there's anything we can tell. I mean, there is a new bug out there called the chili thrip. There are new diseases out there that'll just wipe out the stems. Are you losing your stems or anything?
I had some really huge ones, and I thought, okay, here come the tomatoes, and then nothing. It's huge tomato plants, not.
So we've read a lot that if you use beefsteak tomatoes, and we don't have a hot, humid summer like they do in Tennessee or Georgia, a lot of times they don't produce very well. The smaller tomatoes around here generally produce better, the ones that are this size and smaller. usually produce better because we don't have the heat that they do back east. You know, the heat and humidity at night is what a lot of the big tomatoes want, like Brandywines and Jubilee. You know, a lot of the big tomatoes have trouble with our cooler climate. So,
Yeah, I planted tomatoes late in the season last year. Didn't get anything, but they're bushed out and flowering right now really well. And they're really robust plants in the sheltered area. But I've got cherry tomatoes throughout the winter. They're not much, but they're hanging in. Well, my question is, if you have a bigger garden spot and you're planting tomatoes there, can you just dig that soil out, use the same spot again?
well, it's okay. So all plants,
I'm thinking in terms of sunlight.
right? All crops in excuse me, in farming require crop rotation, and the reason we do that. So we'll have a class on that stuff in about a month. But proper crop rotation. So the reason farmers rotate crops, a friend of mine runs Orange County Produce, and they told me they're on a 10 crop rotation cycle. So if they grow a tomato crop, they will not grow tomatoes again for the next 9 crops. And the reason for that is each crop in the ground leaves a lot of dead roots. And those dead roots are very detrimental to that plant, not to, you know, if you grow a tomato plant, those dead roots are very detrimental to tomatoes and any close relatives. Peppers, potatoes, tomatillos won't like the dead tomato roots there. If you plant corn there, it doesn't care. It's not closely related. Just like in your house, if you kill a monkey or another person in your house and you chopped up the bodies into the middle parts and scatter them all over your house may only be like 0.5% dead person, but that's enough to really wipe out your health. If you kill a fish in your house, nothing happens. It's not related to you close enough to harbor diseases that are that way. So farms over the years have found out the more time they put in between crops, the better that crop will do, especially to root diseases. Root diseases just build up because of dead bodies in the ground, and it takes a good 4 years to be totally clean. 3 years is not bad. So over the years we've tested in our own garden. So we would grow a tomato in this spot. First year, you know, you basically get what you expect, about 100%. And then the second year in the same exact spot, 70%, still not bad. Third year, total disaster. Plant turned yellow and died before it made a single fruit. And we couldn't grow tomatoes there for the next 3 or 4 years. So you want to make sure you don't grow them in the same spot 2 years more. You know, I would just say try to find a way to do it every 4 years in that spot, if possible, 3 years minimum, and grow something else in between the time. So you load the ground up with dead roots of something unrelated. Yes.
Gary, what about changing out the soil and adding emollients and other things to the soil if you're limited as to where you can grow them?
Well, you certainly change it out. I mean, you know, just dig a hole, take that soil, throw it away, and put in new soil. That certainly works. That's part of crop. You know, that's like rotating your crop without having to move anything. The other way is really difficult. So most plant roots don't grow below a foot. So if you double dig a bed, it's too much work. But you know, in places in the world where the soil is very peaty and soft, it works. But what you do is you take the top foot of soil and you pile it over here. You take the bottom foot of soil below that and put it over there, and then reverse them going back in. So the soil that was down here where there's no roots is now on top. That's double digging a bed. And it works. But I had one person do it. They said it worked, but I'm never doing this again. So
The first time it works, but it's more often. It's not bad, but it's still.
yeah, it's a lot of work. I'd just rather move it someplace else. So try to have, if you have a vegetable garden, try to have 4 different beds, and you put all the related plants in the one bed, and you move them over to the next bed the next year. You keep just moving them down the row. There is a gardening concept called square foot gardening, which has its followers where they divide an area into sections and plant a different vegetable in each 1 foot plot. There's no way you can rotate that. But what these people have found out, so a lot of them use raised beds to do this square foot gardening. They found out that the soil they put in here has to be super light. And what that helps, so they use a lot of vermiculite, a lot of perlite, a lot of peat moss, a lot of compost. They put it in here. When they pull the plants out, the roots come with it because the soil is so light, it's not breaking the roots off. That's the only way you can do that. The advantage of square foot gardening, where you have a different plant in each square, is the bugs and diseases don't travel through there very well because every single plant's different and the bugs can't figure out what you're growing. So it has its advantages, but the main disadvantage, it's impossible to do crop rotation when all the plants are growing in the same soil, essentially. Unless each one of these things is divided and the roots can't cross. So
what is the best soil for tomatoes?
they don't care.
Okay.
They'll grow in anything.
I do leave my old roots in. I've never heard of that before because I just figured they'd just chop them up and let them in because they're part of that site. So maybe I'll take those out now.
Yeah, I mean, the goal on farming now is sustainability, and to be sustainable, it's better to leave the dead crop on the site and let it decompose right there, so all the nutrients from the foliage is returned to the ground. They're still trying to figure out how to do it on large scales, but there's a lot of small farms where they just lay the crop down and let it decompose right on that patch, and then plant something else within it. So okay, tomatoes don't need a lot of fertilizer. Too much fertilizer, you get too much growth and not enough flowers. So you can feed them something. I've read where some people say don't feed them for 2 weeks. A friend of mine who used to grow tomato plants for farms said we don't like to feed them at all when we start them. We want them to be these tough little yellow things that are super strong because they use machines to plant them. So they don't want weak, tender plants, kind of these like this. They want the real rough, tough yellow things that withstand the machinery they're using. But just a good fertilizing when you first start them, not too much, and then you can kind of starve them. I mean, I've grown so many tomato plants, or I've had volunteers come up that you just never fertilize and they're fine. So they need very little fertilizer, but basically nitrogen. The native soil does have a lot of phosphorus in it, which is good for flowering and storing energy and stuff like that. If you're growing them in containers, you do definitely have to fertilize and keep them fertilized. Most potting soils, the nutrition runs right through. The soil on the ground holds on to fertilizer better, so anything from the past is still hanging around, yes.
In pot, would you keep fertilizing them with that biofish, or would you go to something else?
Well, this is a pretty good formula. Just if you want to just keep feeding with that. The potassium's a little bit low. I mean, if you want to be perfect, then you get something with more potassium in it. We do have a product that's just potassium. Potassium makes things juicier. It's the main mineral that makes up the juice of plants. If you want to make it easy, then use a time release like Osmocote 15912 is a really good formula for just about any fruiting plant. It's not organic, but it's easy. So a lot of our customers just do that. My wife does that at her house. Most of the organic fertilizers you put in pots, you've got to do it as often as once a month, depending on how much you water. Okay, and training wise, I mean, tomatoes will produce if you just leave them on the ground. They will do their own thing and be fine. It depends how efficient you want to be in your garden. If you have a huge garden, you know, they say if you stake tomatoes up, they're more likely, the fruit's more likely to sunburn. If you let them leave them on the ground, they're more likely to rot. It's almost even Steven. So it's not a big deal whether or not you do it either way. Now, if you're running a really efficient farm, you stake them up and you trim them. So the most expensive way to grow plants is in a hothouse, a controlled environment hothouse. And so they have to be efficient in there. And a friend of mine who used to run one of those, you know, what they do, and some of our customers do this in their garden. So if you want to be real efficient, so in a hothouse, hothouses are different than, well, okay, let's go back. So you can grow tomatoes in containers. 5 gallons really not big enough. This is a number 5 pot, which we call 5 gallon, but it's really 3.5 gallons. This is a 15-gallon bucket, which is probably around 12 gallons or so. Outside, this might be able to grow you a plant that's about 5 or 6 foot tall and get about a dozen fruit on it. And that's about it. It's just kind of small for outdoor conditions. 15 gallon, you can grow a pretty good sized tomato in it. So for regular outdoor conditions, we would recommend this, although the soil it takes to fill this is quite expensive. Now you can use pure sand. Pure sand was the original potting soil. It's a lot cheaper than our soil. It just weighs 5 times as much. So it's a pain to handle sand, but plants grow really well in sand. In hothouses, a lot of times use a Dutch bucket, which is very close to the size of this kitty litter container. They look like this. They're square to take up less room, 10 by 10 by 12 or something like that. And they often use perlite because, which doesn't hold as much water, but it holds more air. The more air you can get to the roots, the more vigorous the growth is. Of course, in hothouses, they'll turn on that water every 20 minutes if they need to, because this doesn't hold that much water. So, generally in hothouses, you don't need as much dirt to grow the same kind of plant. So in hothouses, because their space is so limited and it's very expensive what they do, we'll put a bucket here, a Dutch bucket. They call it, I don't know why they call it Dutch bucket. It's just a certain size that, well, Holland is the capital of hothouse growing. And the government there has done a lot of research on how to grow plants for profit in greenhouses, because that's their whole economy. So they made this certain bucket size, and they'll grow tomatoes in there, and they'll set them 2 foot apart between plants, because one plant needs about 2 foot of room. One stem needs about 2 foot of room to handle the mature leaves. So as these things grow, the leaves come out about so far, and 2 foot between stems is as close as you want them to be. So although those grow a single stem plant straight up, they'll cut off the side branches. First, you have to be able to tell which side branch is actually a side branch and which is a flowering stem. So like here's now this is a side branch you don't want, but here's the flowering stem right on it. So you keep the flowering stems and you cut off the side branches that are forming to grow them straight up like that. So that's the closest those stems can be to each other over a long period, because they'll have these plants growing in the hothouses for up to 3 years or more. So they just go them straight up in a single row, 2 foot apart. And we have customers who do that in their garden too. A friend of mine who used to grow tomatoes in 15-gallon. You use a 15-gallon bucket and one big stake in each bucket. He would go just one stem straight up as high as he can go. And used to get really good production that way. But he was in the commercial industry, so he knew how to, all the tricks that they have. So just up one stake. Now in hothouses, they've developed a lot of tricks that they do so that you can grow this plant for many years. So, in like 6 months, this thing will be 8 foot tall already. So what they do is they have, so some of the most advanced greenhouses, they'll have a little spool of twine that they put up here and hang the twine down. And they'll clip the vine to this twine. And as the tomato grows upwards, what they do is so the top of the stem doesn't have any, this has leaves, and then about a foot down it's making flowers, and then about a foot below that the fruit is developing, and about a foot below that the fruit is ripe. They say once they harvest the fruit, they strip the leaves off that part of the branch. And as this plant grows, it grows up the spool, and then they start lowering the twine so that after a year or so, it looks like this is straw over here. They've got this tomato stem wrapped on the ground with one stem going up. So they lower the stem, wrap it around the bucket with no leaves on it. They don't want any leaves on here because you don't want to start promoting diseases. And they'll wrap it there and keep it growing up this twine, keep clipping it on the twine as they grow, and they keep lowering the twine. So they can have this bucket in the same spot for 3 years with this roll of tomato plant around it. So that's one of the tricks of their trade that, it's hard for us to do unless you have a greenhouse to keep them going. So disease-wise, tomatoes are, well, I've got a textbook this thick on tomato diseases. It's just, you just don't even want to look through it because there's just so many diseases they can get. Now, there are fungicides you can use, but they cost so much more than the tomato plants. It's like, just buy a new plant if you get disease with that. Fortunately, most of the diseases are due to wet leaves. If water sits on the leaf undisturbed for 4 or 5 hours, disease spores floating in the air, most of them are fungus disease spores, can hatch out germinate in the water and then attack the leaf. If the water is continuously running off or it doesn't sit there very long, the disease can't attack. So during a rainstorm, diseases can't attack. It's after the rainstorm, the leaves stay wet for half a day, then that's when you get diseases. Now, when the plants are real small and they're sitting by themselves, they tend to dry off very quickly. Once they get real full and you have all these branches laying on each other, they can stay wet for days. So that's one of the other reasons to have them staked up nicely, is so that they dry off quickly. Or, back 10 years ago when we were doing farmers markets, 12 years ago, our tomato plants that we're going to sell at the farmers markets, I'd take my fan out there and dry them off so that we didn't get any problems. Now you can just cover them up at night, or cover them with a trash can or something when it's raining. But actually it's just after the rain stops that you have to worry about. So if you tap the plant real good, get that water off it. One of the tricks in rose gardens, they say, is, if the morning is real dewy, go out there and around 7 o'clock and just spray them down. Knock that dew off so that any spores in the dew can't really get into the plant, and the water you just sprayed on them should dry off within a few hours since the sun is already up, so that the disease doesn't have a chance to get into the leaf. So that's another trick that you can do. Keep that water moving and then making sure it dries off quickly after that. So, so early in the season, if it rains on them, generally you don't have any problems. If you see a little black spot start forming on the leaf, pick it off, cure it that way. If the center stem gets infected with black spots, it's history. You got to just toss it and start over again. But a lot of times we get these spots on the leaves, septoria leaf spot, early blight, late blight. Just pick them off when you see them, cut them off, and try to cure your plants that way. So just keep a good eye. And we do that here at the nursery too. Pick off spots that get leaves that have spots on them. Yes.
We sent away and got one of those small greenhouse kits. It's pretty much a plastic envelope with a frame. So if we're going to try to grow tomatoes in that, I can adopt that system. But I'm wondering in terms of ventilation and water, should I go at a certain time and allow things to dry, open it up to dry out?
I'm not a hothouse person. I don't know all the specifics because most hothouses, they have humidity meters and all that, temperature meters going on. They want to keep a certain temperature, a certain humidity, and I don't know the answer to that. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
What about reflected heat, like off of the side of a house, off of the plaster, or off of the pool? Is that necessarily bad for them, or?
Well, if you were in Palm Springs, it would be probably deadly, but around here, I don't know, the last few years, we just haven't gotten hot. I don't think we hit 100 last year. We got into the 90s, and that was about it. And the year before that wasn't even close to that.
In general, they're not real sensitive to having.
They can tolerate real hot conditions. I mean, most tomatoes are grown in the Central Valley where it's like 95 to 98 every day in the summer. So it's, it's not great for flowering and fruiting, but it's fine for maturing the fruit that's on there to have that heat. I mean, this weather right now is actually very good for growing fruit. What we're having right now, 50s, 60s, 70s. And the low 80s is fine for growing tomatoes.
So it feels a little cool to plant them right now. You're saying we can plant them right now this week.
A lot of people wanted them in January because they want to get their plants 6 foot high before the weather turns perfect. So, yeah. I mean, 20 years ago, it'd been too cold.
Yeah, it seems too cold.
We just don't get frosts. We haven't seen frosts in how many years now? Yeah, it's just, now, be aware that our climate, we don't know what's going to happen. No one can predict, because when I first started gardening back in the early 80s, we had hot winters. We had really hot winters. And then after 5 years of gardening in my backyard, we had the coldest temperatures ever recorded in California. The late 80s were the coldest winter temperatures ever recorded. Now, they've only been recording temperatures since 1870, so it's not like that's our full history. But 1989, 1990, we hit the 20s. And that was after real hot 1980, 81, 82, 83. Those were hot winters. And then the late 80s were the coldest winters on record. So I don't know that that we might see that again. Because we do know, we've seen the history of Orange County. The 1920s were really cold here. Not record, but really cool years. The 1930s were really hot years. He said the hottest temperatures ever recorded that on thermometers that were around in those since those days were in the 1930s. 30s, early 40s were hot, and then it got real cool. It goes back and forth. We'll see what happens. We don't know what's going to happen this year. Next month may be really cold. March may be our winter. We'll have to wait and see what happens. So all these plants may die in cold weather next month. We don't know.
What about seeds directly into the ground, not in a pot?
Too cold.
too cold.
It's not worth it. You got to start them, because tomato seeds want to be over 90 degrees to sprout real well. You know, if you grow radish seeds, they'll sprout at 45, but tomato seeds, you don't get much until you get close to 90 degrees. So,
And probably better just to buy the starter pots.
this time of year, definitely. Yeah. But yeah, if you got a whole setup, I mean, my daughter has, you know, the purple lights and the heating pads and all that in her house. So if you do that, you can do almost anything. Okay, bug-wise, there are some serious bugs around. The most serious ones are the ones that transmit diseases. So there's a thing called the potato psyllid. I mean, you won't notice this bug, but potato psyllid, little tiny creature that looks like an aphid. And it's been a problem for the last 10 years now. So they said about 10 years ago, coastal San Diego lost 70% of its tomato crop, and Baja 80-90% of the tomato crop got messed up because this potato psyllid, which sucks on new growth, was transmitting a disease, a bacterial infection that was wiping out the plants. And they said the only way you can stop it, which they were doing along the coast of northern San Diego, was put a systemic insecticide in the field before you planted your plants. So those plants all had systemic insecticides running through them. In theory, systemic insecticides don't get into the fruit because the systemic is connected to the the xylem, which is the watering system from the roots to the leaves, and the fruit is connected to the phloem, which is the backflow stuff made in the leaves back down to the roots. But I don't trust that. I would rather not use the systemic insecticide on my tomato plant. This year, California took all the systemics off the retail market. They think it's better for us if we don't handle systemics, although the systemic we took off was very safe around people. In fact, it's one of the things we still use on pets to kill fleas. But they don't trust, our government doesn't trust us to be smart enough to use them. So anyway, that's the egg department in California says they're going to relook at this because they don't think the ban was proper. Take away all the tools that we had for certain insects. But anyway, so this psyllid is real bad news. Wherever it sucks on a plant, it can cut off the circulation of that stem. So if you have a tomato plant that looks great and suddenly one whole stem turns brown and dries up, doesn't kill the plant, just kills that stem. That's that disease that this bug is spreading. And we saw that a lot 5-6 years ago, where a whole stem would just dry up on us. The rest of the plant looked fine. And that was that disease. There's another bug out there called a chili thrip. That sucks on new growth. It only occurs during real hot weather, so we haven't seen it much the last 2 years. But what happens is all the new growth just shrivels up on the top of the plant in late summer and early fall. You can spray for it using a product containing spinosad. So spinosad is one of the most, these two products here have spinosad in them. I'll write that down. Spinosad is an organic pesticide found in a rum distillery, so it's apparently present in rum. So they consider it safe to use on edibles. It kills thrips better than any other material we know. It'll also kill the big 4-inch hornworms that appear usually in July. So up until July, you know, there might be a few little caterpillars running around of different kinds that don't cause much trouble. But starting in July, you get these hornworms. You know, the moth flies around at night, lays the eggs. The moth you can mistake for a hummingbird. It sounds like a hummingbird going by, and it zooms in there, lays eggs. The first week, the caterpillar is like 1/4 inch, doesn't do much damage. The second week, it's about 3/4 of an inch doesn't do a lot of damage. Third week of its life, you can eat the entire branch. Fourth week of life, it gets huge. That's,
I've seen those in my garden.
yeah, so they appear in July, and the spinosad will take care of them too. So if you spray this once a month on your tomato plants, you'll never see that. This lasts 2 weeks on the plant, takes 2 weeks for a hornworm to get to damaging size. So if you spray about every 2 weeks during the summer months and fall, the hornworms are out until November, through November. And then they disappear until the next July. There's a tomato dust out there with BT. We're not big fans. So BT is a disease that kills caterpillars. The problem with BT is they have to make a new batch every year. It's like a new disease every year to kill them. So anything left over from last year, you just throw it away. It only lasts 4 hours on the plant at most. So you'd have to apply it every few weeks. I don't know. We used to carry BT and it would expire on the shelf in 6 months. So we'd be throwing away more BT than we were selling. It just wasn't worth it. Spinosad, which has a 5-year shelf life, it's a much better product. Both are organic. I don't know that BT is safer than spinosad. Okay, so that's most of the bugs. Any other questions on culture on tomatoes? I think I covered. Well, they can get mildew. The last few years have been bad mildew years, and they can get spider mites. So spider mites is one of the big problems with tomatoes. They survive it. So spider mites are real tiny spiders that you won't see them unless you know what you're looking for. They're about the size of a large printed dot, period. But they make little webs. So if you have a bad spider mite attack on a tomato, the plants kind of turn gray because they're sucking the green out of it. And they leave all these fine webs in between the leaves, and they'll just shut that plant down. It won't kill it, shut them down. Usually, like when I was a kid, I grew tomato plants, and every summer they'd get spider mites real bad, and the plant would just shut down for a while, not grow. But spider mite populations generally crash after a while, and then the plant would get going again, and I'd get a fall crop on it. But in those days, we didn't know what to do with spider mites. Now we know you can take a hose out there and put a nozzle on the end and just blast them real good once a week, and that, well, every time you blast them, you'll knock off 99% of them. A few eggs will be on there. They have to hatch. You have to blast them again. But if you do that 3 weeks in a row, you'll get rid of them. The other way is you just take an oil spray and spray them real good with an oil. One of the horticultural oils like neem, or this is mineral oil. And that usually kills them in one shot. Although you might have to treat again in a few weeks because there might be some eggs that hatch. So spider mites can do real nasty on, well, they just shut the plant down if it gets real bad. So that's one of the more damaging bugs that we get. Okay, I think that's pretty good on that. So we'll talk about irrigation-wise. So all the research we're getting from agriculture is constant, frequent light irrigation is much better than what we used to do. So most farms are going, like in hothouses, they water often as often as every 2 hours. But farms used to water once a week, flood irrigation, then they went to drip irrigation every 2 days. And now everybody's going to daily irrigation or even multiple times per day. Because we have the technology, have timers and drip. You can turn on as often as you like. And they're finding out the more frequently they water, the less water they apply at each irrigation, the better the plant, the crop does, across all crops. Every industry is finding that out. Citrus just found out, hey, if we water 3 times a day, we get much better results than if we watered every 2 days on drip. Everybody's finding that out. I mean, there's some farms in the Central Valley that said they water 18 times a day. And they saved a whole bunch of water, they said, because when the more deeply you water, the plants can't find that water that went real deep. You're wasting water. And the plants get stressed when the water, amount of water in the ground gets low. So if you keep them from ever getting stressed, it really helps them out. Just like us. I mean, if you get 1 drink a day, you feel bloated half the day and then you feel dead dry the rest of the day. And apparently plants are not a whole lot different. They're just less stressed if you give them water constantly. And all the research that they pulled down says there's no disadvantage to that at all, because they did a study in an orchard where they watered part of the orchard once a week, the other part once every day, same watering system, same amount of water per week. They pulled the plants out at the end of the year. The plants they watered every day versus once a week had bigger roots. They were expecting the exact opposite, but they didn't get it. So now they know that frequent light irrigation also develops better root systems. So again, no advantage to watering deeply and infrequent unless you just don't want to use the water. So, okay. Now some crops taste a little better if you hold back the water. So wine grapes, they say, you get the sugar content higher if you hold back on the water, but they have to do that with computers. You can't do that generally by yourself. Okay, so the varieties, we'll go over some of the real well-known ones. So the first variety that was really promoted in the United States was the first hybrid that was sold, and that was Big Boy. And that name is, if you were alive, if you're as old as I am, that name was big back in the 50s and 60s, Big Boy tomatoes. The first hybrid sold, so the plants were stronger than most, so most people can grow them. And they were very uniform. So I can't remember how many parents they had, but they said the gentleman who developed the Big Boy hybrid tomato in the 1940s on his deathbed revealed the parentage that they used. It's like those things are supposed to be big secrets. But anyway, so they put together certain heirloom tomatoes to make these hybrids, and Big Boy was the big name in the 50s. Now, when I came into business, my parents ran the nursery in the 60s. The big names there were Better Boy and Early Girl, and they're still very popular to this day. So they're hybrids. Better Boy is still supposed to be the #1 selling tomato in the United States. 6 packs of Better Boys. These are medium-sized tomatoes. They're not huge tomatoes. Early Girl is still one of my favorites. So it can produce very early and quickly in the year. The fruits are about that size, and they've got good acidity and good sugar. They're sweet and they got some good bite to them. I've always liked Early Girls. I think that is one of the better tomatoes that we sell. So we got Early Girl here. Big Beef came out in the 80s. Another hybrid. This is supposed to be, when it came out, it was considered the wonder of the plant world, or of hybridized tomatoes, because it's too perfect. Now the flavor is not that unusual, so it won't draw the rave reviews about that. But production-wise, disease resistance, when we grew the fruit, it didn't look real because they're too round. The fruit's like a perfectly round fruit, no creases, no cracks. It's just too perfect. It looks artificial. It's just a weird plant. Big beef I grew in my yard, and the second year did just about as well as the first year. It made it to its fourth year, so it's a real strong plant. Didn't produce well in its fourth year, but it made it through 3 years in my garden. So it's just, it's good. It's not, but it's not great. It's not one of those plants you go, okay, this is wonderful tasting, but it's certainly, for a lot of people, it was a good tomato for them. Another hybrid, Lemon Boy. This is a yellow tomato, and most people will tell you who grown Lemon Boy, they've never seen anything more productive in their life. So when you grow Lemon Boys, you just expect a huge crop of large yellow fruit, mild flavored. It just goes to town. Everyone who grows this will tell you the same thing. Most production they've ever seen on a tomato plant. Now the cherry tomatoes, the first tomato I ever grew was Sweet 100, and it's still a really good tomato. They're a little small for cherries, smaller than the ones at the store, but really good. And there's a lot of different cherry tomatoes out there. Nowadays, our best seller tends to be black cherry. There's a lot of good cherries though. The Sun Gold is another cherry. Sun Gold is a small yellow cherry tomato. It's not perfect. It tends to split easy, especially if a lot of times you take them and you wash them and half them split in the bowl. But it's really sweet and good. This is actually a hybrid that was created in Japan. I thought it was an heirloom from Europe because they said it's the most popular tomato grown in England, but it's a Japanese variety. In fact, our most popular tomato we sell is a Japanese tomato called Momotaro. It's a hybrid. It's kind of a pinky red tomato. This is Momotaro. They got the Japanese label on. Now Momotaro, I forgot to tell you about. So you can get Momotaro either from this company as a hybrid, but they do make a Momotaro heirloom too. So it's cheaper. The seeds are cheaper, but they're not nearly as good. So sometimes there are other growers will sell us Momotaros, and we know they're not the original because they don't have this tag on them. And sometimes they don't turn out as good. So what they did is they heirloomized it. So they took Momotaro plants, grew the plants, saved the seeds, planted those seeds. About half those seeds don't look like Momotaro. Eliminate those, save the ones that look like and taste like Momotaro, save those. You do that 7 or 8 times, and your population starts looking the same. You don't have as many outliers. The 2 heirloom parents aren't showing up as much. And so those seeds will be Momotaro's heirloom version, but they don't have the broad genetics that the hybrid did. So the original hybrids always taste the same. Sometimes if you get the heirloom version of Momotaro, it doesn't turn out very good. Because those seeds it depends on who was doing the seed growing, how accurate they were with that. And generally too, anytime you grow seeds, even the hybrid seeds, one out of 20, or even sometimes 1 out of 10 won't look right. You just throw it away, because seeds, you know, it's still, we call most seed grown plants variety, because there is variety among seeds. Every seed is genetically different. So the hybrids are more similar because they've got the same exact parents, but still, you know, my brothers didn't look, they look like me, but not exactly. So, okay, so those are some famous, well, actually another one that's real famous is Juliet. So this is Juliet, and it's famous because it's the original grape tomato. It was the original one. It's a hybrid. So one of the parents was a Roma type tomato, and the other parent was a cherry tomato. They were trying to develop a cherry tomato that didn't squirt at you, because cherry tomatoes are very famous. You put it in your mouth and sometimes. So they crossed cherries and Romas, which are the paste tomatoes that are kind of pear-shaped, and got Juliet, which is the shape of a grape. And that's where all the grape tomatoes descended from, was Juliet. That's a good tomato. I do like Juliets a lot. So
Variety would you recommend for 2 blocks to the beach?
I don't know that there's a huge difference weather-wise. I mean, I don't know that they'd be that different. I mean, we still go to our backup. Momotaro is still awful good. That's about as good as tomatoes as you can eat. So it's very similar to Early Girl. Sweet, you know, it's quite sweet, but still has the acidity, so it's not bland. Like Lemon Boy to me is a little bland, but this one's got the flavor. But is a little on the sweet side. So, you know, I just go out there and pick them and eat them. You know, it's just like eating fruit. Momotaro. There's the Momotaro Gold, and there's a new one that was created in Japan called Reika. And we have it out there. And Reika is supposed to be the descendant, the next step from Momotaro. I haven't eaten enough Reikas to tell you it's better than Momotaro, but the breeder said this is the next beyond Momotaro. But there's Momotaro, the original is pink, and then we have Momotaro Gold, which is the yellow version of it, gold version. And then we have the Reika. There is a famous tomato out there called Aiko, which is another grape tomato. And another cherry out there, Chica cherry. These are all from Japan, made, I don't know if they're the same grower, but they got similar tags. So those are all real popular with our customers. They all seem to be high quality tomatoes from Japan. I don't know what they charge for a tomato in Japan. You know, I know they charge a lot more than they do in the United States. Now, the heirlooms are real popular too. So the heirloom that started the heirloom craze is Brandywine. The problem we have is our weather is not that conducive again for the big tomatoes like Brandywine. So Brandywine is famous for making 2. But boy, Brandywine, so Brandywine tomatoes are noted because they're not very sweet, but they taste like tomato soup. They're really good. I mean, they are really good. But they're notably poor producers. So this year, we decided to get some grafted Brandywines. So grafted tomatoes We first tried these about 10 years ago because they cost twice as much as regular tomatoes. So we have a grower up in Oregon, log house plants, and they discovered, well, they use a wild tomato, a really strong wild tomato that's got incredible roots, real good strength to it, and they grow it from seed. And then when the plants are, say, this big, they'll just snip it off, and then they'll get a stem from the tomato they want, the Brandywine, and stick it on there, and they hold it together with a little plastic tube that's been split down the middle to hold it in place, and it grows together. They do this in a greenhouse, of course, so it's so it doesn't wilt too badly before it grows together, and then they grow it that way. So virtually, they say 90% of all hothouse tomatoes are grafted because it makes them stronger. And what we found out is when we grew a Brandywine, a grafted Brandywine, it made like 10 fruit instead of just 2. And we did that in the fall. We got them in September that year in a 5-gallon bucket, and they had 10 fruit. And my big one in the ground only had 2. So we know that this is a much sturdier plant. We got in 3 or 4 different kinds of tomatoes, and they all, you can tell, they were just a lot more productive than the regular ones. So grafted tomatoes cost twice as much, but they make sense, especially if you don't have room, like in a hothouse. You don't have room for a huge plant. If you're on a balcony somewhere, this may be worth it, definitely worth it, because they seem to be much more productive than regular tomato plants, and they can live longer too with their sturdier roots. So we're going to get grafted Brandywines. Well, okay, we ordered them. Hopefully they show up in a week. They'll come into us real small. We'll have to grow them for a few weeks before we sell them. We don't get that many varieties. A lot of the varieties they sell, we don't recognize names because most of them are hothouse varieties, and they're probably not as good as Brandywine. Last year we had Berkeley tie-dye, and everybody was real happy with the results of that one. This year they didn't offer that one, I don't think. I don't remember seeing the name there, but Brandywine is certainly one to do. We're also getting in this is a novelty one where they take, for the root system, they use potato plant, and they graft on tomato on top of it. So they call it ketchup and fries. We'll see. It may not be very good potatoes, and may not be very good tomatoes, but it's just a novelty. You want to see if it works or not. So Brandywine original heirloom. Black Krim is one of the best tasting tomatoes I've ever grown. So it's one of the black tomatoes. Black tomatoes aren't truly black. They appear dark. So what happens is they've got the deep red skin, and they've got green flesh, and that combination makes them look black. And we don't know if it's just our imagination or not, but when you eat a black Krim, when I've eaten black Krim, it tastes like it's both smoked and salted. When I grew black Krim in my garden, I didn't get much fruit because the birds went after that one. I had 9 different tomatoes growing, and that's the only one they wanted to eat. They wanted to eat all my black Krims. Ugly tomatoes, they get cat facing, which is creases on them. They split easy, but flavor was there. This was one of the plants that created the original Big Boy. The guy said this is how he got her flavor, and it was the black Krim. So a lot of the black tomatoes win awards. It may be visual, but black from Tula is certainly another one of the best tasting tomatoes out there. They're from, the Eastern European area. I mean, tomatoes are native, we think, to west coast of South America originally. Then we have the Romas, which are the ones that have fewer seeds and less juice in them. There's a few others out there, but these are some of the main names to know. Any other questions? Oh, there's the striped ones too. So there's a lot of striped tomatoes. Green Zebra was the first popular striped tomato. And what's interesting is the flesh is also has various colors in it, and everyone claims that the green areas are more acidic and the yellow areas in the fruit are more sweet. So it makes a nice taste sensation when you're eating the striped tomatoes. So we'll get quite a few striped tomatoes during the year. So right now we've got kind of the early basic ones. Next month, especially mid-March, we'll have probably 50, 60 varieties out there. The growers are a little more cautious to say these days about planting everything at once, because during the pandemic, the industry ran out of tomato seeds. It was terrible. So many people were growing tomatoes that they ran out of seeds. So now they're a little more careful about when they time them, get them during the right time. They don't plant them all at once like they did before, because they just ran out of seeds. Yes.
I was looking at your avocado trees out there. Are you getting more avocado trees in as well?
Yes, so we just announced in our newsletter. If you don't get our newsletter, it's on our website. You can sign up for our weekly newsletter. And our grower just contacted us and saying that we'll be getting, so we get avocados this big that are grafted. Usually within a year, they're this tall and they're making flowers and fruit. If you grow them properly, and we can't find any wholesale grower we can buy an avocado tree that we trust from. So we get them, in pots this big around, grafted, and we grow them ourselves, and we just get far better results. So we'll have probably about 1,500 trees in here in 2 weeks. That's when it's scheduled for. 19 varieties, no Hass. But most of them are Hass descendants that are better than Hass as far as, especially production-wise.
And will some of them be dwarfs?
Pardon?
Dwarfs also, or just right?
So it turns out that avocados that produce heavily can't grow. So there is one true dwarf avocado we get called Holiday, which acts like a vine, so it never grows tall anyway. But most of the avocados that are super heavy producers, when they're growing a crop, they're weighed down so badly. So like, I hate to go off subject, but there is one called Gwen that was first tested at the Irvine Field Station, and I have pictures of the Gwens in those days. They said Gwen will grow 20 feet if it's not fruiting, but in the fields with the fruit on them, they're like this big, because on their second year they're making 50 fruit per tree. On their third year they're doing 140, and it just went more and more after that. They're just crazy producers, and they said if left on their own, all the branches just keep breaking off. They're real heavy producers, and they can't get any height because of the fruit production, which, the farms tried it for a decade. They said, we can't grow this tree. It just keeps busting up on us. So all the modern avocados going to the orchards nowadays are descendants of Gwen.